I'm not the social reformer. But we're dealing with the world as it is, and the world as it is, Baldwin says, it was my good luck, 29, that I found myself in the church racket instead of some other. He's pretty honest there. And surrendered to a spiritual seduction long before I even knew anything about carnal knowledge. By the way, carnal knowledge, he means by carnal knowledge, sex. For when the pastor asked me, carnal means the body, with a marvelous smile, whose little boy are you? My heart replied, why, yours. I think he goes on in that vein. A lot of in his life in the church. 32, I was saved. But at the same time, out of a deep adolescent cunning, I did not pretend to understand or realize immediately that I could not remain in the church merely as another worshiper. I would have to give myself something to do in order not to be bored. I became a preacher, a young minister. I remained in the pulpit for 3 years. The church was very exciting, 33. So he describes his life in the church. Nothing that happened to me since, bottom of that page, equals the power and the glory I sometimes felt when in the middle of a sermon I knew I was somehow, by some miracle, really carrying, as they said, the word. When the church and I were one, and their pain and joy were mine, and mine was there, and they surrendered their pain and joy to me, and I surrendered to them, and so on, and these cries rang out. So that's a good description, really. If you're, how many of you want to teach when you get into higher calling? Well, if you want that to happen to you, do what I'm doing. Don't bring in notes. Let the Holy Spirit take hold of you. And you'd be amazed at what you can feel with your audience once you let so-called Holy Spirit, or whatever you want to call it, the Muse, whatever it is. It took me a long time to realize that you have to go in and face audiences without notes, without canning something, and so on and so forth. When I first lectured, I did what my professors at college had done. I had professors who had everything written out, and then I even had professors who would read chapters out of their books. Well, if you want to keep your classes awake and have that experience that James Baldwin describes there, you have to be able, you have to be willing to go in without any props and let it all fly. And then if you do that, sometimes some holy moments of the kind he describes will happen to you. I'm not saying what's happening here, but I'm just saying that my advice to you is teaching. I don't know if any of you teaching courses ever told you, just go in and have confidence in yourself and let things happen. And as he describes it, sometimes these wonderful moments can happen. That's what he felt when he was young. But if you go in frightened, afraid, and with all kinds of props, those moments will never come until you throw them all away. It's like throwing your crutches away, going to Lourdes or something. So anyway, I'm giving you a little bit of advice from my own experience and his here. So he does tell you of things that can happen to you when you let it all hang out, as I said. About a year after 34, I began to preach. I began to read again, and he suddenly started reading works of literature at high school. Now, being in New York, it turned out that a lot of people in his high school were Jewish. And Jews tend, sometimes, not all Jews, a lot of Jews tend to be intellectuals or even pseudo-intellectuals, if you like. And he started meeting Jewish kids who were intellectual, or at least had pretense of being intellectual. I was in a high school that was predominantly Jewish, 34 at the bottom. This meant I was surrounded by people who were, by definition, well, in the Christian view of things, according to his father, beyond salvation and so on. In coming in contact with these people, he learned, page 36, again, the Jewish boys in the high school were troubling, because I could find no point of connection between them and the pawnbrokers and landlords and grocery store owners who I met in Harlem. The kids were different. In other words, they were quite free, liberated. They weren't they hadn't been reduced to being businessmen and businessmen. You see, at this point, what he's experiencing in Harlem is something like the experience in South LA I just mentioned in the Rodney King matter. I think one of the mistakes people make is